There are things in this world I have absolutely no patience for, and near the top of that list is a woman who walks out on her 5-year-old boy on a Tuesday evening in January, the kind of cold that settles into Hamilton, Ontario like it means to stay until April, disappears for 17 years, and then resurfaces in a lawyer's office in Calgary with a pressed blazer, a notarized petition, and the audacity to use the word mother. I live that, and if you think you know where this ends, I'd ask you to sit with me for a while, because you don't. My name is Philip Mercer. I'm 62 years old. I take my coffee from Tim Hortons, always a double-double, and for the last 17 years I have been the only parent my son has ever had. Not because biology alone made me his father, it did, but because I chose to show up every single morning. And there's a real difference between those two things. Welcome to Dad's Fierce Revenge. Get comfortable. These stories don't dress us anything up, and neither do I. Before I get to what happened, you need to understand what came before it. I met my wife when I was 36 years old. I was a civil engineer working on a water treatment project in Mississauga. She was doing contract work at the same firm. Sharp, well-dressed, the kind of person who answered your question before you finished asking it. We got married a couple of years later. Our son was born the year I turned 40. He was a calm baby, a quiet toddler. By the time he started junior kindergarten, it was clear he was wired differently. He was diagnosed with ADHD and a severe processing disorder, dyslexia at age 6. I want to be clear about something. His brain was not broken. It operated on a different architecture than what schools were designed for. He saw the world sideways to everyone else, and the world, for the most part, did not have the patience for it. My wife did not take the diagnosis well. I want to be fair about that. Fear is human, and I understand it. What I cannot make sense of, and have spent 17 years trying not to dwell on too hard, is what she chose to do with it. She left on a Tuesday evening in January. Our son was 5 years old. She said she was going to Shoppers Drug Mart to pick up a birthday card for her sister. She kissed him on the top of his head. She walked out the front door. She did not come back. She left with a man from her office. She moved to Calgary. She sent me one email in February, to me, not to our son, saying she needed space to figure out who she was and hoped I would understand someday. I want to tell you about the weeks that followed, but I'm going to keep this brief. Not because it doesn't matter, but because some things are not entirely mine to put into words. What I will tell you is this. Our son was 5 years old, and every single morning for 3 weeks he asked me where his mom had gone. Every morning without fail, I told him she needed some time away and that we were going to be just fine, the two of us. I don't think I believed it until the third or fourth time I said it out loud. So I raised him alone. In a 3-bedroom house in the east end of Hamilton, 2 blocks from a school that spent the next 8 years making his life more difficult than it needed to be. I worked engineering contracts during the day and read research papers at night. I learned about executive function and working memory and sensory load, not because a specialist told me to, but because the more I understood how my son's brain actually worked, the better chance I had of building a life around it instead of against it. I sat through every IEP meeting alone. My signature was on every document, every accommodation form, every consent for assessment. I was the one driving to the specialist in Burlington twice a month, 40 minutes each way. I was the one who figured out, slowly and through a lot of failed attempts, that my son did not need silence to focus. He needed texture. A box fan on low, or rain sounds, or the television murmuring in the background with nothing narrative about it. Just sound he could sink into without being pulled by it. I don't know how I worked that out. You work things out when you're the only person available to work them out. He was 12 when he discovered coding. Not through school. School was still a daily negotiation between what he needed and what the system could offer. He found it through a free online course, the kind where you go at your own pace and nobody cares how long it takes. He sat at the kitchen table one Saturday afternoon, worked through 3 modules in a row, and when he looked up at me, his face had the specific expression of someone who has just discovered that something in the world actually makes sense to them. "Dad," he said, "I understand this." I turned toward the sink so he wouldn't see my face. That was the beginning. Over the next 4 years, he built things I could follow in broad strokes, but not in fine detail. A routine management app, he called it Steady, designed specifically for people with ADHD and processing disorders. The premise was this. Most productivity tools are built for brains that already function the way the tool assumes. Steady was built for brains like his. Adaptive reminders, sensory load tracking, task-breaking features that mapped onto how ADHD executive function actually behaves rather than how planners assume it should. He had beta users by 15. By the time he was 20, Steady had over 90,000 active users across Canada. A health technology company in Vancouver acquired it for 3.6 million Canadian dollars. He came downstairs on a Wednesday morning to tell me. He sat across from me at the kitchen table with his laptop and said, "The offer finalized this morning." I set my coffee down. 3.6 million, he said. I nodded once. Then I put my elbows on the table and my face in my hands and sat there for a long time. My son reached across and patted my forearm. "You're not going to cry, are you?" he asked. "No," I said, into my hands. He said nothing. He had the particular patience of someone who knows exactly what's happening and is giving you the dignity of a moment. I cried in the driveway afterward, standing next to my 12-year-old Civic in January, which is the Hamilton version of losing it in a parking garage. I called nobody because there was nobody to call. I stood there and thought about 17 years of IEP meetings and therapy drives and Saturday evenings at the kitchen table, going through accommodated homework one line at a time, and I felt something I hadn't felt in longer than I could remember. Like we'd actually made it. That feeling lasted 11 months. 14 months after the acquisition closed, I received a phone call from a law firm in Calgary. A man named Mr. Dempsey. Smooth voice, the kind that is professionally calm in ways designed to unsettle you. "Mr. Mercer," he said, "I'm calling on behalf of a client who has concerns about the financial management of your son's acquisition proceeds." I went very still. "And who," I said, "is your client?" A pause. "Your former spouse." I set the phone on the counter. Not hung up, set it down the way you set something down when you need a moment before you pick it back up. I walked to the back window and looked out at the steps where my son used to sit when he needed to decompress after a hard day at school. Then I picked the phone back up. "Mr. Dempsey," I said, "your client is welcome to try." 3 days later, the story was out. I still don't know exactly how it got placed so quickly, but money and a well-positioned contact are usually enough. The narrative her legal team had constructed was clean and, I'll give them credit, devastatingly sympathetic. A concerned mother, long estranged from her son through difficult circumstances, worried that a young man with a disability was not receiving independent financial guidance, that the person managing his affairs might have his own interests at heart. That person was me. By Thursday morning, 2 outlets had run versions of the story. I had received calls from people I hadn't spoken to in years. A former colleague sent me a message saying he'd seen something online and wanted to check in, using that particular careful tone people use when they're not quite sure what they believe. I sat at the kitchen table that night and read everything I could find, and I felt something I hadn't felt since my son was 5 years old, standing in his bedroom doorway with no idea what to say. Genuine fear, not for myself, for him, for what this noise was about to do to someone who had spent his entire life building something that actually worked. Finally, at last. My lawyer, Bruce Langford, had been in family law for over 20 years. He sat across from me in his office on King Street the following Monday and said carefully, "Philip, she's framed this well, we need to move. Documentation, financial records, character witnesses, everything going back as far as you have it." "I have everything," I told him. "I'm a civil engineer by trade. I keep records the way other people keep dishes, compulsively and out of a deep structural need, every IEP report, every therapy invoice, every specialist billing statement, every school communication over 14 years, my signature on every line." "I'm not worried about the truth," I said. "I'm worried about the noise before the truth can land." Bruce nodded. He said that was exactly the right thing to be worried about. That evening, my son came downstairs. He was 22, living at home while he worked on his next project. He'd seen the stories, I could tell by his expression, which most people read as blankness, but which I have learned, over 22 years, means his brain is running faster than it's showing. He sat across from me. He looked at my phone on the table. He looked at me. "She moved earlier than I expected," he said. "I thought we had another 2 months." I stared at him. "I've been preparing since last spring," he said. "When a background check on you cleared through a firm connected to a Calgary law office, I flagged it." He said this with the same tone you'd use to note you'd seen rain in the forecast. "I set a monitoring alert on any legal inquiry connected to either of our names, 18 months ago, just after the acquisition closed." I want to describe what I felt in that moment, but the English language doesn't have the precise word for it. It sits somewhere between being deeply moved and being mildly insulted that my 22-year-old had been running quiet counterintelligence while I was out here lying awake catastrophizing. "I didn't tell you," he added, "because you would have spent the past year and a half worrying about something that hadn't happened yet." He slid a USB drive across the table. "Start with the index file," he said. "Here is what my son had built. I need you to understand the scope of it. Because when I tell you this young man was prepared, I mean he was prepared the way someone who has spent his entire life being underestimated gets prepared when he finally decides to stop being quiet about it. First, my records. Every IEP report from junior kindergarten through to his last year of high school, every therapy receipt, every specialist billing statement, every piece of school correspondence I had sent or received over 14 years. Scanned, named, organized by date and category, cross-referenced with the OHIP records we were able to access. A complete timeline, year by year, appointment by appointment, of who had been present for every significant moment of his medical and educational life. It was always me, never her, not once. Second, and this is where I had to put the drive down and go stand at the window for a while. My son had maintained, without my knowledge, his own archive. Not a legal one, a human one. Every piece of correspondence that had ever come from his mother. The birthday card she sent when he was 9 2 weeks late, with a gift card to a store that had closed the year before. An email she sent when he was 15 saying she was proud of him, sent to a school address he hadn't used since grade 7, which told him she had made no effort to find the right one. A voicemail from 4 years ago, left on a number she didn't know he had access to, in which she said, and I'll keep this brief, because it doesn't need any embellishment, that she had made peace with her decision, that she hoped someone was looking after him, and that she didn't think she was the person who could be in his life. She said those words when he was 18 years old. He had saved that voicemail in 4 separate locations, he had typed a full transcript, time-stamped it, and had it notarized through an online service. I stood at the window for a long time. Bruce arrived by 8 that morning and sat at the table going through the drive with the expression of a man who keeps reaching the same astonishing conclusion. "Philip," he said quietly, "this kid just won the case." But my son wasn't finished. He had also anticipated, because he thinks in contingencies the way I think in load calculations, that the legal case alone would not be enough. His mother's move was not just legal, it was public. She needed people to believe the story before anyone examined the evidence. And the way you counter that, he explained to Bruce and me with the measured clarity of someone delivering a project debrief, is not with a single press statement. One statement, he said, gets one news cycle, then it's gone. If you release everything at once, they take what they want and bury the rest. That's not how you control the pace. He tapped the table. You give them one document per day, one piece at a time. You make them keep coming back. Bruce looked at him for a moment. "How do you know that?" he asked. My son looked at Bruce with the patient expression of someone being asked to explain something straightforward. "I read," he said. Over the next 11 days, his legal team, 2 lawyers he had researched and retained himself, which I am not even pretending to be surprised about, released documentation in a sequence he had personally mapped out, 1 piece per day, 11 days, 11 pieces of the record. Day 1, my attendance at every single IEP meeting, 14 years of my signature on every line. Day 2, 16 years of therapy and specialist billing, 1 guarantor named on every account. Day 3, my son's own written statement, 3 paragraphs, plain language. The kind of plainness that lands harder than any flourish could. He described his childhood. He described his father. He described the complete and unbroken absence of his biological mother in his own words, without bitterness, without drama. The facts were enough. Day 4, the notarized voicemail transcript released in full. By day 6, the tone of the coverage had shifted. The same outlets that had run the exploitation story were now running questions about the validity of the original claims. By day 8, 2 of them had quietly published corrections. By day 10, Mr. Dempsey released a statement calling the document releases an orchestrated campaign to embarrass my client. My son read it, nodded once, and said, "Good, she's rattled." The mediation was set for the following Thursday. I did not sleep the night before. I lay on my back going through everything that could go wrong, which is a habit I have maintained since my son was 5 and I could not afford anything to go wrong. My son knocked on my bedroom door at 5:30 in the morning. He came in and sat on the edge of the bed and looked at me in the dark. "I need you to hear something," he said. I looked at him. "You didn't fail me." He said it simply, the way he says everything. "I know you still carry those 3 weeks. The question he asked you every morning, the answers you had to give him when you didn't know what to say." He held my gaze. "You should put that down. You didn't leave." "That's the whole story, Dad. That's all of it." I had nothing to say. I am 62 years old, and I have learned that some moments you don't try to navigate with words, you just receive them. He stood up, straightened his jacket. "We should leave by 7:15, or we'll catch the construction on the 403. I laughed. out loud in the dark at 5:30 in the morning. Yeah, I said. Okay, son. The mediation center was a glass and beige building in downtown Hamilton that looked exactly like every glass and beige building in every downtown in Ontario, designed apparently to make everyone inside feel equivalently small and equally accountable to the process. His mother was already there when we arrived, standing near reception with Mr. Dempsey and a second lawyer in a gray coat, polished, composed in the particular way of people who have not yet understood how thoroughly the ground has shifted beneath them. She looked at me when we walked in. I looked back. I felt remarkably little, which I think surprised her. She'd been expecting something, anger maybe, or the discomfort of a man who has something to hide. Instead, she got Philip Mercer walking across a lobby, eating the last triangle of toast he'd wrapped in a paper towel for the road. She looked at my son. Something moved across her face. There and gone in under a second, a complicated grief that she locked away before it could become anything real. My son looked at her the way he looks at most things, steadily, with quiet curiosity, and without any particular weight. He nodded at her politely, the way you nod at a stranger who holds the elevator door. She flinched very slightly, I noticed. The mediation ran 4 hours. I'm not going to walk you through every minute of it, because watching Bruce and my son's attorneys work with 11 days of methodically released documentation behind them was less like a legal proceeding and more like watching someone very calmly unpack a trunk in front of a person who had insisted the trunk was empty. Mr. Dempsey pushed hard. He called the document releases a coordinated harassment campaign. He tried to contextualize the voicemail. I will leave it to you to determine how much context was missing from a recording in which a woman stated she had made peace with not being in her child's life. The mediator, Miss Portier, had the particular expression of someone who has adjudicated every permutation of human mess and is mildly but durably unimpressed by all of it. She had the stillness of someone who has already reached her conclusion and is simply allowing the process to arrive at the same place. At the midday break, my son stood, buttoned his jacket, and said to his lawyer quietly, I'd like to make the offer before we reconvene. I had known it was coming. He'd told me the night before. Knowing and watching are still two different things. The offer was a single type page, 3 paragraphs, precise and restrained in language I could not have managed. It said that my son was prepared to cease all further document releases, make no additional public statements, and pursue no defamation action, provided that his mother withdrew her petition permanently, waived all future claims to involvement in his financial or personal affairs, and left, simply left. In exchange, he would never speak of her publicly again. That was the offer. Mr. Dempsey read it, conferred with his client in a low voice in the corner of the hallway. I watched her face from across the room, the calculation behind her eyes, the inventory of options, the measuring of what leverage she still believed she had. She looked up, she looked directly at my son, and she shook her head. I don't know what she thought she still held. Maybe she believed there was a move left that she hadn't played. Maybe 17 years of absence had genuinely convinced her. She still carried some weight in this equation. Whatever it was the wrong call. My son had anticipated it. He didn't flinch. He turned to his lawyer and said one sentence. His lawyer opened the document binder and placed it on the table. What it contained was not a legal brief. It was a complete record, organized the way my son organizes everything. The IEP attendance sheets, 16 years of billing statements, the birthday card with the expired gift card, still in its original envelope, still in his possession because he keeps everything, the way you keep things you cannot yet decide how to feel about. The email sent to the wrong address, the voicemail transcript. 17 years assembled without drama, in order from start to finish. And at the very back, a single printed page. It was a document my son had written when he was 14 years old. The original mission statement for Steady, composed in a notebook and later typed up when he began developing the app in earnest. His lawyer read it aloud into the room. I have it memorized. I built this for every kid whose brain works differently and who had only one person who decided to stay. 11 words, written at 14, in a room where his mother was sitting. The mediation room went completely quiet, the kind of quiet where you become aware of the ventilation system in the ceiling. I looked at her. She was staring at that page the way you stare at something that cannot be taken back. Her hands were folded in her lap. She was very, very still. And for the first time since she had walked back into our lives with her lawyers and her petition and her freshly notarized claims, she looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had made a choice and was only now sitting inside the full weight of it. Mr. Dempsey leaned over and said something quiet. She closed her eyes. The petition was withdrawn before the afternoon session. She left the building without a word, no statement, no parting gesture. She walked through the front doors, got into a waiting car, and was gone. I stood on the sidewalk outside in the October air and felt something I had not felt since January 17 years ago, except in the completely opposite direction. Not dread. Something close to silence. The specific kind that arrives when a weight lifts that you had stopped noticing was there. My son came and stood beside me on the sidewalk. We looked at the street. "How are you feeling?" I asked. He thought about it in the genuine way he considers everything. "Settled," he said. I nodded. "Yeah, me too." He glanced over at me. "There's a Tim Hortons on James Street." "I know the one." "You owe me a coffee?" "How exactly do I owe you a coffee?" He looked at me. "You cried in the driveway last January. I saw you from my window." I didn't say anything because you needed a minute. A pause. I've been keeping track. I stared at him. Then I laughed. The kind that gets out before you can catch it. The kind that echoes off the concrete of a Hamilton sidewalk on a Tuesday in October. "Yeah," I said, "coffee's on me." We walked to the Tim Hortons on James Street, the one we'd been going to since he was 9 years old, when I used to bribe him through his accommodated homework with Timbits and patience, and the particular stubbornness of a man who refuses to believe his kid can't get there. We sat at the corner table by the window. We ordered the usual. The October light came through the glass at that low afternoon angle that makes everything look steadier than it is. He opened his laptop. He had 3 things to reply to. He started typing. I drank my coffee and watched the street and didn't say anything, because some moments don't need words. You just sit inside them for a while and let them be what they are. A disability advocacy foundation in Toronto gave him an award the following spring. The citation said Steady had been downloaded by 150,000 Canadians, and that it had been credited by users as the tool that helped them hold a job, finish a degree, manage a household, for the first time. They called it technology built by and for the people it serves. He told me about it the day before the ceremony. I asked why he hadn't mentioned it sooner. He shrugged, eyes on his screen. "I knew you'd make a thing of it." "I absolutely would have," I said. He almost smiled. My son almost smiling is worth more than most people's full laughs. I put my arm around his shoulders, the way I have since he was small, since those first weeks after she left when he would come and sit beside me in the evenings and neither of us would say much, just 2 people getting through it together, one Tuesday at a time. 17 years, every IEP meeting, every box fan at night, and every Tim Hortons in the morning, and every single moment in between. I wouldn't trade a day of it.